Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson, Chapter 15, The Lad with the Silver Button, Through the Isle of Mull, Part 2. Next day, the fourth of my travels, we were up before 5 upon the clock, but my rascal guide got to the bottle at once, and it was 3 hours before I had him clear of the house, and then, as you shall hear, only for a worse disappointment. As long as we went down a heathery valley that lay before Mr. McLean's house, all went well, only my guide looked constantly over his shoulder, and when I asked him the cause, only grinned at me. No sooner, however, had we crossed the back of a hill and got out of sight of the house windows than he told me Torosay lay right in front, and that a hilltop, which he pointed out, was my best landmark. "I care very little for that," said I, "since you are going with me." The impudent cheat answered me in the Gaelic that he had no English. "My fine fellow," I said, "I know very well your English comes and goes. Tell me what will bring it back. Is it more money you wish?" "5 shillings mair," said he, "and hersel will bring you there." I reflected a while and then offered him 2, which he accepted greedily, and insisted on having in his hands at once, for luck, as he said, but I think it was rather for my misfortune. The 2 shillings carried him not quite as many miles, at the end of which distance he sat down upon the wayside and took off his brogues from his feet, like a man about to rest. I was now red-hot. "Ha!" said I. "Have you no more English?" He said impudently, "No." At that I boiled over and lifted my hand to strike him, and he, drawing a knife from his rags, squatted back and grinned at me like a wildcat. At that, forgetting everything but my anger, I ran in upon him, put aside his knife with my left, and struck him in the mouth with the right. I was a strong lad and very angry, and he but a little man, and he went down before me heavily. By good luck his knife flew out of his hand as he fell. I picked up both that and his brogues, wished him a good morning, and set off upon my way, leaving him barefoot and disarmed. I chuckled to myself as I went, being sure I was done with that rogue for a variety of reasons. First, he knew he could have no more of my money. Next, the brogues were worth in that country only a few pence. And lastly, the knife, which was really a dagger, it was against the law for him to carry. In about half an hour of walk, I overtook a great ragged man, moving pretty fast, but feeling before him with a staff. He was quite blind, and told me he was a catechist, which should have put me at my ease, but his face went against me. It seemed dark and dangerous and secret, and presently, as we began to go on alongside, I saw the steel butt of a pistol sticking from under the flap of his coat pocket. To carry such a thing meant a fine of £15 sterling upon a first offence, and transportation to the colonies upon a second. Nor could I quite see why a religious teacher should go armed, or what a blind man could be doing with a pistol. I told him about my guide, for I was proud of what I'd done, and my vanity for once got the heels of my prudence. At the mention of the 5 shillings he cried out so loud that I made up my mind I should say nothing of the other 2, and was glad he could not see my blushes. "Was it too much?" I asked, a little faltering. "Too much?" cries he. "Why, I will guide you to Torosay myself for a dram of brandy, and give you the great pleasure of my company, me that is a man of some learning, in the bargain." I said I did not see how a blind man could be a guide, but at that he laughed aloud, and said his stick was eyes enough for an eagle. "In the Isle of Mull, at least," says he, "where I know every stone and heather bush by mark of head. See now," he said, striking right and left as if to make sure, "down there a burn is running, and at the head of it there stands a bit of a small hill with a stone cocked upon the top of that, and it's hard at the foot of the hill that the way runs by to Torosay, and the way here, being for droves, is plainly trodden, and will show grassy through the heather." I had to own he was right in every feature, and told my wonder. "Ha!" says he, "that's nothing. Would ye believe me now, that before the Act came out, and when there were weapons in this country, I could shoot? Aye, could I," cries he, and then with a leer, "if ye had such a thing as a pistol here to try with, I would show you how it's done." I told him I had nothing of the sort, and gave him a wider berth. If he had known, his pistol stuck at that time quite plainly out of his pocket, and I could see the sun twinkle on the steel of the butt. But by the better luck for me, he knew nothing, thought all was covered, and lied on in the dark. He then began to question me cunningly where I came from, whether I was rich, whether I could change a 5-shilling piece for him, which he declared he had that moment in his sporran, and all the time he kept edging up to me, and I avoiding him. We were now upon a sort of green cattle track which crossed the hills towards Torresay, and we kept changing sides upon that like dancers in a reel. I had so plainly the upper hand that my spirits rose, and indeed I took a pleasure in this game of blind man's buff, but the catechist grew angrier and angrier, and at last began to swear in Gaelic and to strike from my legs with his staff. Then I told him that, sure enough, I had a pistol in my pocket as well as he, and if he did not strike across the hill due south, I would even blow his brains out. He became at once very polite, and after trying to soften me for some time, but quite in vain, he cursed me once more in Gaelic, and took himself off. I watched him striding along through bog and briar, tapping with his stick, until he turned the end of a hill and disappeared in the next hollow. Then I struck on again for Torresay, much better pleased to be alone than to travel with that man of learning. This was an unlucky day, and these two, of whom I had just rid myself, one after the other, were the two worst men I met with in the Highlands. At Torresay, on the Sound of Mull and looking over to the mainland of Morven, there was an inn with an innkeeper, who was a MacLean, it appeared, of a very high family. For to keep an inn is thought even more genteel in the Highlands than it is with us, perhaps as partaking of hospitality, or perhaps because the trade is idle and drunken. He spoke good English, and finding me to be something of a scholar, tried me first in French, where he easily beat me, and then in the Latin, in which I don't know which of us did best. This pleasant rivalry put us at once upon friendly terms, and I sat up and drank punch with him, or to be more correct, sat up and watched him drink it, until he was so tipsy that he wept upon my shoulder. I tried him as if by accident with a sight of Allen's button, but it was plain he had never seen or heard of it. Indeed, he bore some grudge against the family and friends of Ardshiel, and before he was drunk he read me a lampoon in very good Latin, but with a very ill meaning, which he had made in elegiac verses upon a person of that house. When I told him of my catechist, he shook his head, and said I was lucky to have got clear off. "That is a very dangerous man," he said. "Duncan McKee is his name. He can shoot by the ear at several yards, and has been often accused of highway robberies, and once of murder." "The cream of it is," says I, "that he called himself a catechist." "And why should he not," says he, "when that is what he is? It was MacLean of Duart gave it to him because he was blind, but perhaps it was a pity," says my host, "for he is always on the road, going from one place to another to hear the young folk say their religion, and doubtless that is a great temptation to the poor man." At last, when my landlord could drink no more, he showed me to a bed, and I lay down in very good spirits, having travelled the greater part of that big and crooked island of Mull, from Earaid to Torresay, 50 miles as the crow flies, and, with my wanderings, much nearer 100, in 4 days and with little fatigue. Indeed, I was by far in better heart and health of body at the end of that long tramp than I had been at the beginning.